Terence LeVar Thornton, aka Pusha T, is an old veteran rapper at this point. He is like 40 years old, 41 years old. He has been in the game since the early 2000s. This guy formed the duo with his brother, Clips, they were called. Pretty much a legendary hip-hop duo at this point. If you've never heard a Clips album, or at least a Clips song, then I would advise you to go back and listen to some of their work, because they were pretty damn good. Clips didn't continue making music past the 2010s though, and it took a bit of a while for Pusha T to establish himself as a solo artist with a mixtape, but then really breaking onto the scene with My Name Is My Name, an album I never really liked outside a couple of songs, but the standout song from that album, Numbers on the Boards, I'm telling you, man, top 10 rap song of the decade. I'm saying it. Fucking love that song, it's unreal. Pusha T just doing his excellent braggadocio all over that song. He then dropped an album that was supposed to be a prelude to the King Push album, which has never come. And by the way, this King Push album was meant to come out in like 2016, so it didn't come out then, and then we got to 2017 and it never came out then, and here we are. May 2018, Daytona has come, and we do not have King Push, but we have a 21-minute album. A 21-minute full-length release. I say that in quotation marks because, let's be honest, we can't quite call this a full-length release when we were supposed to be expecting the King Push album, and this is what we've got instead. I think it is led to believe that it was a name change though. It suddenly changed from King Push to Daytona. But there are people already coming out and saying that this is an iconic album, it's classic, it's legendary. All the old veterans in the hip-hop game are throwing their praise onto this album, and I can't help but feel a little bit confused as to how you could throw a word like a classic on an album that doesn't even feel like it stays on long enough to even warrant that word in the sentence of a discussion of this album. Of course, you know how fans can be these days, especially in hip-hop discussions. Perhaps it shouldn't be taken too seriously. Perhaps the word classic is just becoming meaningless because it sure as hell seems that way. Enough with all that anyway. I guess I should really come out with my thoughts on this release, this Daytona album from Pusha T. And first of all, right out the bat, I just want to talk about this album cover, because the album cover shouldn't be something that represents an album, or, well, maybe not represents, that's the wrong word, but not necessarily representing the content of an album. But this album cover certainly became a topic amongst people because of the connotations that it brings. It is linked, or it is in fact an actual photo of Whitney Houston's bathroom. And of course you most likely know that at this point Whitney Houston died from an overdose, a drug overdose, in a bathtub. And so perhaps with that in mind, you could look at this album cover in a few ways. The first being, Kanye West changed the album cover because he's edgy and he likes to rile up conversations and make things controversial. That is something that many people have already been saying, I know. Secondly, you could look at it from the fact that this is the lifestyle of rich people. Rich, famous people get to a point where they just, can't quite handle their lives. We seem to think that famous people have it easy. We seem to think that the lifestyle is just glamorous, rich, but in fact they're still people and they still have mental health problems just like anyone else. But it always comes down to the fact that when you get so rich, you'll end up just taking drugs and la-di-da-di-da. Or the third way to look at it, which is the one I've been seeing the most, is that this is the other side to what Pusha T raps about. So of course he raps a lot about selling drugs, and selling drugs actually leads to this, and this is the album cover juxtaposing the things that he says on this album. Now, this is where I take issue with this idea, because why would this be the album cover if the entire album is just filled with braggadocious lyrics about selling drugs? Like, surely Pusha T would denounce drug use or selling drugs in some kind of way if he was gonna choose this for the album cover, or if, well, Kanye chose it or whatever. It's not deep at all. It doesn't make sense. Like, you're gonna have to denounce drug use in some kind of way if this is gonna be your album cover, because then you're saying nothing. Because this album doesn't say anything about drug use really at all. So the album cover matching with this kind of album, it doesn't make sense. I don't get that. And that kind of left me a little bit salty, to be honest, thinking that this is the album cover chosen for this album, when the entire album from front to back, I mean, bar the final song, which I'll talk about, is just, you know, bragging about selling drugs. And this is the thing with this album, is that the content interests me in no way at all. I don't get the appeal, really. I know hip hop has always been built on this foundation. You know, it's not the first time a rapper has ever rapped about these topics. Of course, some rappers will rap about the lives that they witness in front of them. The lives they live. Not necessarily they're bragging about it, but they are just merely demonstrating what happens in those kind of circles in certain places in America. Which I've always appreciated rappers that do that, because it brings out a new, different perspective, and you see the dark side of how life can be. But you can't say that for Pusha T, because that's not what he's doing. He's essentially just straight up, I sell the drugs, I used to sell the drugs, I'm the king of selling drugs, there is no one else out there that's as good as me. These trappers don't become rappers anymore, the rappers become trappers, he mentions on one song. He's the top 5 OG of this lifestyle, who is now rich and lives a glorious life. Top 5 questionable, because if he was top 5 then he would have versatility and rap about anything else. I'm sorry, but what is it about the content on this album that's grabbing people? This cannot be a critically acclaimed classic if it's doing what's already been done a million times before. And the thing is, Pusha T is very witty, he comes out with some funny lines occasionally, he words things in a clever way, but when the content is not compelling at all, when you're just mindlessly bragging, endlessly bragging, what's so good about listening to that? It's essentially one note, like it's just a one note album, and I get bored after like 3 or 4 tracks of hearing him say the same stuff, because he really does over and over again. Now, we do get some insight in the track Santeria. It's not just the same the whole way through. Luckily, we actually find out a little bit of background to a person that he was very close to getting killed, and so this is essentially a revenge song. It's very cold and vicious. Some of the lines he drops in this track are just absolutely oof, especially in that second verse. Like, he is really ready to take out this person that killed the person he was very close to. And yeah, this track is actually a nice little change of pace, because it feels incredibly dark the way he's rapping on this track, and it's just not the same sort of thing that he's rapping on previous songs, so it at least brings things to a difference, you know, it alleviates that sort of story arc that he's got going on. It's something else which I just appreciate. Now, aside from the content, I've got to say that the major highlight of this album is Kanye West. He is dealing with all the production on this album, which is absolutely fantastic, because every track is produced very well. I do not think there's a single beat on this album that I am not bobbing my head to, or I am not at least interested in, because that's the thing, Pusha T matches these beats perfectly. So if you were just listening to this album like through surface level, just, oh, I'm listening to the songs, then you're going to enjoy it, but then the minute you delve into the lyrics, there's really not much to pull apart. The hook on the first track is really good, it's just a shame that the rest of the song doesn't really match up to it. And the opening part where he keeps saying boy, and he rhymes boy with boy, like, 6 times or something. It's really just like the worst thing. Like it was the worst intro for this album. Like he could have done anything else, but he picked that, and it was just such a letdown. But at least when you get past that part, the beat is good. There's a good hook. If you know, you know. The second track, The Games We Play, definitely my favorite on the album. Definitely has the best beat. Another great hook as well. This is the track that really got me thinking, okay, this is where the album could really pick up. Um, but unfortunately, I just don't think it does, and it's mostly due to the fact that the endless bragging amounts to not really that much. Like, he's bragging about things that aren't to do with rap, but yet he still sees himself as being one of the great rappers. So it's like, you're not really giving us anything here at all. Like Elzai will brag about being a great rapper, but then on another song, he will show us why he's a great rapper. Whereas Pusha T does not do that at all. And even other rappers out there too that are actually pretty damn good rappers don't need to tell us constantly that they are the best. You know, they are humble. We look at their music and we appreciate it for what it is. And that's how we determine that they are one of the greats, you know? If you're self-claiming that you're one of the greats and you don't really show it on any of your songs, then it kind of really leaves you left wanting more. And that's exactly what a 21-minute album does. It leaves you wanting more. The way this album closes off with Infrared doesn't really feel like a tie-up to this album, doesn't really feel like a closing track on an album, but I must say that it's certainly worth being on the album because it's pretty damn fantastic. This is a track that's taking direct shots at Drake, who has now responded to this, which is probably going to start some kind of beef. Honestly, I think Drake isn't one of the better rappers around, really. He may be a good artist, but he's not really one of the better rappers around, so I'm kind of hoping that Pusha T just shoots him down with a follow-up song, but we'll have to see how that goes. But this Infrared song is really damn good. He calls Drake out for having ghostwriters. Not exactly the first time that anyone's called out Drake for having ghostwriters, but he does it in a pretty unique way, and also continues going at Drake for the rest of the song, just making references to the fact that he's not really on par with someone like a Kendrick or a Cole. He's basically just playing a gimmick and stuff like that. And it's a pretty dark track in its sound. There's very little to it. It's just Pusha T spitting over this track. This is the kind of stuff I live for when it comes to rap beefs, because it's just straight up cold, just throwing in these metaphors that you kind of have to read into, and you know what it is when you read into it, and then it kind of hits you and you're like, oh. We get a little bit of a reference to this on What Would Meek Do Too. This is a track before. There's a few things here because of obviously Meek Mill and Drake having that beef, but we know that Meek Mill got absolutely destroyed because he isn't a good rapper, really. Kanye features on this song, puts in a pretty good verse. Not that impressed with it, but I think he makes some references to the things that's been going on lately, mentions MAGA hats again. You know, he didn't really, he just didn't need to bring that up. It's becoming corny at this point. But yeah, overall, I think the album's just fine. I think it's okay. If this album's like 50 minutes and it was basically the same content that we got on the like first 5 tracks or whatever, like, oh boy, this would have been painful to get through, I think. I want more from my rappers, to be honest, and I think at this point Pusha T isn't really as interesting as he once was, in my opinion. And this album really just proves that. He doesn't have much to say, there's not much insight on anything other than the fact that he views himself as a great guy that sells drugs and he's one of the best to ever do it. That's all you really get. Even on the diss track that I said was great, Infrared, he has to mention the fact that the only rapper to sell more dope than him was Eazy-E. So even when he's firing shots at people, he somehow still has to tell us he's selling drugs. It's like Logic telling us he's biracial. It's the same thing, it's just something different that's being said. I think, to be honest, a lot of people at this point are just being sucked in by the production because the production's so good, so that immediately means that the album's great. But I need more than that, and the albums in the hip hop genre that I've praised highly this year, that you can go watch those reviews if you'd like, if you've never watched any of my other reviews, you know, you'll see that these rappers in those albums are not just two-dimensional or one-dimensional even. Like, they have so much to them, and there's so many layers to pick off in their rhymes, in the things they talk about. There's just so much more to it than this. And when you've heard better, you can't really praise what's not really that good. It's just good that Pusha T is witty and sounds really good on a beat. That's the best I can really say from this album. And Kanye West's production is pretty stellar, and I would like to hear more of his production on more rap albums. Perhaps rappers that have a little bit more to say than Pusha T. Maybe I'd like that. But for what it is, I'm gonna go with a C. It's okay. I don't really think it's anything special. Yeah. So, what do you think about the album? I'm sorry that I don't love it, but what do you think about the album? Comment with your thoughts, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, let me know what you thought of my review, and that is it. I hope you enjoyed this video, hope you enjoyed the album. That's pretty cool if you did, and have a good day. Grind it, grind it, grind it.